Here's what we did up to this point. The first thing we really tried to focus on is helping everyone understand that the first thing out of your mouth, the first thing you got to talk about is the problem you're going to solve. Because if you're immediately going to talking about your solution, then you're going to find that you've lost whoever it is you were trying to convince that they need to be interested in what it is you're trying to tell them. So that's the very first thing. It's an immediate paradigm shift. A lot of folks think the first thing they need to do is start coming up and talking about the product or service they offer. That's not what I need you to do. You got 6 seconds to get this person's attention. And in that first 6 seconds, you have to convince them that what you want to talk about is important to them. And that's by describing the problem. So the next thing we did is we dove a little deeper into that and talking about the impact of the problem. Look, we all have problems. Maybe your shirt collar is too tight. Maybe your shorts are too long, right? Or too short. Those aren't the kind of problems we're trying to solve. Those are inconveniences. These are the kinds of things that impact people's lives and impact a lot of people's lives. So when we talk about the impact and the research that you got to do to make sure you understand what those problems are, after you've identified who the problem impacts, you got to figure out who else is working on this. And that's what we talked about in research, how to use the Congressional Budget Justification book and some other tools. Then in our last session, our teammate Anthony came on and talked about how to build your presentation. It was a great presentation he gave on how to do that. And so we'll have links to that at the end of today's presentation so you can see them if you like. Today, what I want to talk to you about is still around this space of problems. And now we're going to really start getting into how you're going to tell your stories and what you need to be able to do to communicate the facts that actually matter about your stories. I'm going to introduce you to this tool called a value proposition canvas. You can download this at a website that is strategizer.com. The author is Alex Osterwalder. He's got several great tools. I want to focus in on this one for the next couple of lessons because it lets us connect what we try to provide in our products and services with what we think people need. And today we're going to talk particularly about this section on the right-hand side, where we describe what people's jobs are and what pains they have and gains they want when they try and do those jobs. So let's dive into that. Defining someone's jobs is what helps you understand for those individual groups of people what the impact of the problem is. For example, if you're in the military, everyone has a military occupational specialty or a branch. That doesn't necessarily define what your job is at the time. It's important to understand for each of these beneficiary groups, for each of these groups of archetypes that we want to tell stories about, what's the real job they have to do? Maybe your job is as an 11 Bravo infantryman, you're supposed to close with and kill the enemy, but you're currently assigned to be the sergeant major's driver, right? You're still an infantryman, but that's not your day-to-day job right now. The same happens at every level for every grade, every military occupational specialty. It happens in the civilian world. Your job and your degree may be as a civil engineer. You may be currently working in business development. So understanding for different groups of people what the actual jobs they have to do helps you understand how to convey the problem that you're solving for them. We talk about jobs in a few different ways. You can go online and look at the duties and responsibilities in someone's job description. That doesn't always describe what they actually have to do, and maybe just as importantly, why they do it. So there are functional jobs, which are the kinds of things you'd expect to see in the duty description you were hired for. But then there are social jobs where part of what you do is making sure you represent the brand for your organization. Those are things that you need to be able to do as you get out and communicate with other people. There are things that you as an individual see as your personal job that you want to get done. Maybe it's very important to you to make sure that everyone in the office has a clean working environment. So no matter what anyone else does, you make sure that everything around the office is tidy as you go about your daily business, not because you're some sort of a neat freak, but more because you're trying to add value for your teammates. And that's how you see yourself, the role you see yourself in, the job you have. These things can vary. I'm trying to give you some really disparate examples. The key is you've got to understand If there's a problem you're solving it for human beings. If you don't understand what jobs those human beings are trying to do, the only way you're going to solve a problem for them is by sheer luck. So that's your first thing, is to figure out what are the jobs that people do that you think you're solving a problem for. So the next thing we want to talk about, and we're just going to focus on this right-hand side of the value proposition canvas today, are the pains. This is relatively straightforward. I have a job. My job as an infantryman is to close with and kill the enemy. A pain for me being able to do that is they shoot back at me, right? This causes me a problem. A pain for me being able to do my job of close with and kill the enemy is that sometimes I got to walk a long ways to get there. So mobility is a pain I have to solve. Then there are other things that translate exactly to the office environment. Again, I do business development for a living. If that's my job, one of my pains is figuring out who are the most important clients for me to go, or potential customers for me to go talk to. How do I go about doing that? What sort of data analysis, what kind of research can I do to understand who I need to go talk to? You can think of a lot of other examples, but the key I want you to get out of this slide and what we're talking about here is how the individual jobs that someone has each have different pains. So you're not one person with one job and you have one pain. All of us have multiple jobs we have to do, and each one of those jobs has a different type of obstacle in the way of it at different times. The key I want to foot stomp to you about why it's worth your time to do this is because this is where your stories come from. This is how you make the problem that you're trying to convey real. When you're able to say, hey, ma'am, I'm out there trying to figure out how do I get every service member more opportunity to get a college education? And what I found over and over again is that every time they try and log on to their tuition assistance website, there's errors, there's problems, it disconnects, the information in the course catalog isn't current with what our catalog says. So these people who have this job to go get an education have a pain that the system we've tried to give them doesn't work. And now you want to be very specific. You want to talk about someone you interviewed who had this pain. You want to talk about them by name. You want to describe their situation. And the whole while what you're doing is using this as one example because you want the person that you're pitching to understand this, internalize it, and make it real. You want them thinking at the same time you're talking, oh yeah, I remember that problem. I've seen that problem. I know someone who experiences that problem. So these are the kinds of things you need to think about in terms of why this tool, this value proposition canvas in particular, has any value to you in terms of how you pitch, because we haven't even talked about what your product is yet. And that's going to be a recurring theme as we get through all 6 of these lessons, is that if you do the right things with setting up the problem, and we've given you the tools to figure out how to uncover those really powerful and important stories, by the time you get to your solution, it'll be obvious that everyone needs it. So that's the way we're trying to help you set up a really effective pitch. Statistics are always good as long as you can rely on them and feel comfortable with them. So make sure you're going to do any kind of research when you say the Department of Defense spends $465 million a year on tuition assistance. And so every time that we have a service member who's trying to use that system and it's inefficient, we're wasting more of our own time and money to try and help service members. So those are the kinds of things, if they're true and you can cite them, use statistics. They stick in people's mind as long as you can tie it to a story. So the other part of the value proposition canvas we talk about quickly are gains. This is much harder. I have a little different view on this than what the author does. The author will start immediately talking about gains, actually in terms of the products and services. I want you to think about what the gain someone gets out of the job they do. So let's go back to that 11 Bravo infantryman. Why does that person do that job? We can talk about all the things that make it hard for them to do the job, but the real fundamental why, what drives them, what makes that important to them? Is it because they just love the physical challenge? Is it because they love the potential adrenaline rush? Or is it because they see themselves as part of something bigger? Is it because It makes them feel like they're a valued member of society if they do something to protect everyone else in the country by putting their life on the line to do that job. These are the kind of really fundamental things that cause people to do what they do on a daily basis. And if you can tap into that, then that's the grand slam home run. Once you can figure out why someone does something, what's their true motivation, and you can figure out something that helps them do it, then everyone wants it. And that's why these things are so hard to uncover. Quite frankly, if you're doing this for the first time, focus on the pains, unless you really think you understand this clearly. But trust me, these things are not going to be straightforward. I listed the idea of the expected gains that you would have, the unexpected gains. So the expected gains you get from your job. Hey, I signed up for the Army, signed up to be an infantryman. They told me I'd get money for college. I expect to have money for college. Okay, that's true. It's not that fundamental why that I'm getting at. Those are the kinds of things I want you to think about with gains if you want to get into that space. But really, for the most part, I'm showing you this for completeness. I think going about this the first time, you want to talk about the pains that you can solve for someone who's trying to do a job. Same theme. Tell a story. Use statistics if you can. The only way you're going to be able to tell a story is by going out and engaging with other human beings and talking to them. Those are the kinds of things you can relay and will allow the person that you're trying to pitch to relate to what you're trying to tell them. That's the entirety of our presentation today. It's